A kindergarten romance turned dark when the boy wailed on the girl, but it unraveled a hidden history of violence, prompting me to report his cop father, testify in court, and help his family start a new life. For 10 years, I was a kindergarten teacher to a class of 6-year-olds, and the student stories were even crazier than you can imagine. Every year, there was at least one student who was convinced that, once pooping in the toilet, their poop was then washed by the toilet water. This meant they would fish it out with their bare hands and throw it at their fellow kindergartners. Another time, a kid brought in a tampon that she had fished out from their bathroom bin. It stunk up the entire room, and she told the class it was dynamite. All this meant I was very familiar with the explaining basic concepts to kids part of the job. So one time, when there was a little girl crying in the corner, I was the one who stepped up. I walked over, and in her hand she was clutching a Barbie doll whose head was detached from the neck. It had been a long day, so it was honestly very hard to muster up the patience to deal with what I felt was a trivial issue. So I took a deep breath, but just before I could say anything, another student came along. It was a boy. Now the boys usually make fun of the girls, so I was getting ready to, gently, shoo him away. But suddenly his hand went into his pocket and he pulled out a roll of tape. The little girl gave him a puzzled look, and my expression matched hers. "It's not perfect, but we can still play if we believe it works," he said, and began taping the Barbie doll back together. The little girl began clapping her hands really hard, before wrapping her arms around the boy super tight. My heart melted, and I even felt myself tear up a little. Then, out of nowhere, they started playing together, and the more I paid attention, the more I realized the boy wasn't even enjoying it. He was just playing with her to make her happy, and just when I thought things were good, they got even better. Because over the next few days, the boy was bringing in flowers, chocolates, and even pretty rocks he found for the girl. They'd play together every lunchtime, and he always let her choose what game it was, usually Barbies. At this point, all the other staff noticed too, and we were shipping them. Hard. And by the end of the week, during movie time, they were holding hands when he asked her to be his wife. The girl's eyes widened, and her palms covered her mouth. She shyly looked down at her feet that were kicking back and forth, before accepting and giving him a huge hug. A few of the boys were teasing him, but mostly everyone was clapping and cheering. And as I drove home for the weekend for the first time ever, I was actually excited for Monday to come. Those two kids had restored my faith in humanity so much that I baked cookies, a cake, and even croissants for everyone. But during lunchtime, right before I could take them out, my entire body went cold, because as usual, they were playing with Barbies. But when the girl told him she wanted to play something else, his hand curled up into a fist. He drew his arm back, and it landed on her leg, hard enough for me to see and hear it. I immediately ran over, and she was too shocked to even cry. She just hid behind me. I asked him what he was doing, and he responded with, "I only did it because I love her," just like Daddy always says. My heart broke, and I gave him a very thorough explanation of why no one has the right to hit anyone. And when it finally sunk in, he started crying and told the girl how sorry he was, that he never meant to hurt her. I let them go back to playing, but my mind was racing. It was obvious that he had learned this from his parents, and I knew I had to do something. But the deeper I delved into the situation, the more I realized how dark the whole thing really was. I mentally reviewed our school's protocols for reporting suspected abuse, knowing that whatever action I took would have significant consequences for Lucas and his family. I immediately scheduled an appointment with our school counselor, Ms. Rivera. She had years of experience dealing with these situations, and I trusted her judgment implicitly. Her expertise in child psychology and family dynamics would be invaluable in navigating such a delicate situation. While waiting for the end of the school day, I kept an extra close eye on Lucas and Emma. They seemed to have moved past the incident, but I couldn't shake what I'd witnessed. The image of his little fist and those words about his dad kept replaying in my mind, haunting me with their implications. After the kids left, I filled Ms. Rivera in on everything. She listened carefully, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. She had this calm, composed way about her that made me feel like maybe this wasn't going to be as awful as I feared, though the gravity of the situation remained clear to both of us. "I've been concerned about Lucas before," she admitted, adjusting her glasses thoughtfully. "He drew some concerning pictures in art therapy last month, but nothing actionable. This gives us more to work with." She explained we needed to start by having a conversation with Lucas's parents. We'd schedule a meeting under the pretense of discussing his academic progress. That way, we could observe the family dynamics without raising immediate alarms. Ms. Rivera would be present to help navigate the conversation toward home life and establish a baseline for further action if necessary. "What if they're dangerous?" I asked, my mind running to worst-case scenarios that had kept me awake the previous night. "That's why we start with observation," she explained patiently. "We don't make accusations. We gather information before taking any drastic steps. This approach protects both Lucas and ourselves." I called Lucas's mother that evening and scheduled a parent-teacher conference for Thursday after school. Her voice sounded timid on the phone, almost apologetic for taking up my time. When I assured her it was routine, she seemed relieved but still anxious, which only heightened my concerns about the home situation. Tuesday and Wednesday passed without incident. Lucas and Emma continued playing together, though I noticed Lucas was being extremely careful around her, almost afraid to touch her at all. I wondered if my talk with him had made him overly cautious. During circle time, when Luke from the back row accidentally bumped into Emma, Lucas immediately asked her if she was okay. He seemed hyper-aware of any potential harm coming to her, his eyes constantly scanning for threats to his friend. Thursday arrived, and my nerves were on edge all day. When the final bell rang, I asked my teacher's aide to watch Lucas in the aftercare program while I met with his parents. Ms. Rivera showed up 15 minutes early to brief me once more, bringing with her a folder of resources just in case we needed them. "Remember? Observation first," she reminded me, arranging her materials on the conference table. "Let's see who shows up, how they interact, what they say about discipline at home." At exactly 3:30, there was a soft knock at my classroom door. Lucas's mother, Mrs. Bennett, entered alone. She was a petite woman with blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She wore blue scrubs, clearly coming straight from her job at what I assumed was a medical facility. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of exhaustion, and she had a fading yellowish bruise near her temple that she'd attempted to cover with makeup, though the discoloration remained faintly visible in the classroom's fluorescent lighting. "I'm so sorry Mr. Bennett couldn't make it," she explained hurriedly, clutching her purse tightly against her side. "He works late on Thursdays." The meeting started normally enough. I showed her Lucas's schoolwork, mentioned his strengths in math and his creativity. Ms. Rivera skillfully guided the conversation toward behavior management, her approach gentle but purposeful. "Lucas is generally well behaved," I said carefully, choosing my words with deliberate precision. "But we've noticed some concerning interaction patterns recently." Mrs. Bennett's posture changed immediately. Her shoulders tensed and her hands gripped her purse tighter, knuckles whitening with pressure. "What kind of patterns?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I described the incident with Emma in the gentlest terms possible. As I spoke, Mrs. Bennett's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, eyes welling with tears that threatened to spill onto her cheeks. "He saw that at home, didn't he?" Ms. Rivera asked softly, offering a tissue from the box on my desk. The floodgates opened. Between sobs, Mrs. Bennett revealed what our observation had already suggested. Mr. Bennett had anger issues that had escalated over the past year. What started as yelling had progressed to throwing things, then to physical intimidation, and finally to hitting. She'd been planning to leave but was terrified of his reaction and potential consequences. "He controls all our money," she explained, dabbing at her eyes with the tissue. "I've been saving tips for my nursing job, but it's not enough yet. Lucas wasn't supposed to see any of it. I thought I was protecting him by keeping him in another room." Ms. Rivera Rivera immediately switched gears from school counselor to crisis responder. She had resources, phone numbers, and a plan. She explained that as mandatory reporters, we would need to document what we'd learned, but our priority was getting Mrs. Bennett and Lucas to safety before the situation deteriorated further. I can't go to a shelter, Mrs. Bennett insisted, panic flickering across her face. His father is a police officer. He'd find us. My blood ran cold. This complicated everything. Not only was Mr. Bennett potentially dangerous, but he had authority and connections that could make intervention more difficult. No wonder Mrs. Bennett was so scared and had endured for so long. Ms. Rivera didn't miss a beat. There are shelters in neighboring counties where you could go, places he wouldn't think to look, she explained, pulling out a discreet pamphlet with contact information. The three of us spent the next hour mapping out a safety plan. Mrs. Bennett agreed to pack emergency bags and hide them at her mother's house. She would open a separate bank account at a different bank, and most importantly, she would document everything, taking photos of injuries and keeping a log of incidents in a journal she would store digitally where her husband couldn't find it. What about Lucas? I asked, bringing the conversation back to my primary concern. Should I be doing anything differently with him at school? Ms. Rivera suggested I continue the conversations about appropriate ways to show affection and handle frustration. Children are resilient, she assured both of us. With the right support, he can unlearn these behaviors and develop healthier relationship patterns. Before Mrs. Bennett left, she hugged me with surprising strength. Thank you for paying attention, she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. No one else has. The next few weeks were a balancing act. I kept a close eye on Lucas while trying not to single him out. He and Emma were still inseparable, though their marriage had evolved into a more typical kindergarten friendship. I continued having little talks with him about feelings and healthy relationships, framing them as lessons for the whole class to avoid making him feel targeted or different. Mrs. Bennett texted me updates on their situation. She was implementing the safety plan step by step. Mr. Bennett's behavior was worsening at home, but she was better prepared now. She had started counseling through a program that offered free services to women in her situation and was slowly building a support network beyond her husband's reach. Then came the Monday when Lucas didn't show up for school. No call from a parent, no explanation. I tried calling both contact numbers but got no answer. My stomach was in knots all day. The empty desk in my classroom felt accusatory. Had we failed him? Had our intervention somehow made things worse? Tuesday morning, I was about to call child services when Mrs. Bennett called me during my planning period. Her voice was hushed and shaking, with background noises suggesting she was calling from a public place. We're safe, she assured me quickly. But things escalated over the weekend. Robert found out I was planning to leave. Lucas and I are staying with my sister in Westbrook. Westbrook was about an hour away, too far for Lucas to continue at our school. Mrs. Bennett explained that they were looking for a place of their own, and she'd enrolled Lucas in the local school starting next week. She'd filed for an emergency protective order with the assistance of a legal aid attorney who specialized in domestic violence cases. Did he hurt you? I asked, dreading the answer but needing to know the severity of what had happened. Yes, but we got out, she said, her voice stronger now. Lucas saw some of it. He's been having nightmares about monsters chasing us. I offered to speak with Lucas's new teacher to help with the transition and explain the situation. Mrs. Bennett gratefully accepted. We exchanged emails so she wouldn't have to risk using her phone if Mr. Bennett was monitoring it. Life at school continued. Emma asked about Lucas for a few days, then in the way of kindergartners, found new friends to play with. I explained to the class that Lucas had moved to a new town, and we made him cards to mail to his new school, decorated with colorful drawings and messages of friendship. About 2 weeks later, I received an email from Mrs. Bennett with alarming news. Mr. Bennett had violated the protective order, showing up at her sister's house. The police had been called, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They were moving again, this time to a shelter in an undisclosed location with heightened security protocols. Lucas keeps asking when he can come back to your class, she wrote. He misses Emma and his friends. He drew a picture of your classroom yesterday from memory, getting every detail right down to the reading corner pillows. I shared this update with Ms. Rivera, who immediately reached out through her network of social workers to ensure the Bennett case wasn't falling through the cracks. She learned that because Mr. Bennett was law enforcement, a special unit was handling their case to prevent conflicts of interest and ensure appropriate action. The weeks stretched into months. Spring came, bringing field trips and end-of-year preparations. I received occasional updates from Mrs. Bennett, always from new email addresses. They were still in temporary housing, but Lucas was adjusting well to his new school. She had found a job at a hospital and was saving for a more permanent solution that would allow them to feel settled and secure. Then one Friday in May, I looked up to see Officer Rodriguez, our school resource officer, standing in my doorway during lunch. My heart dropped. Officer Rodriguez never came to the kindergarten wing unless something was wrong. Can I speak with you privately? He asked, his expression serious but not alarming. As my teacher's aide took over supervising lunch, Officer Rodriguez explained that Mr. Bennett had been arrested the previous night. He had tracked his wife to her new workplace and created a disturbance. What could have been a simple trespassing charge escalated when he assaulted the security guard who intervened. I thought you should know since you were involved in the initial reporting, Officer Rodriguez explained. His department is taking this very seriously. There's going to be an internal investigation about past complaints that were potentially mishandled by his colleagues. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the situation was being addressed, but profound sadness for what this family had endured. Officer Rodriguez mentioned that Mrs. Bennett and Lucas were staying with relatives again now that the immediate danger had passed. 2 weeks before the end of the school year, I received an unexpected email from Mrs. Bennett. They were moving back to the area, not to their old house, but to an apartment complex on the other side of the district. Lucas would be finishing the school year at his current school, but she wanted to know if he could visit our class on the last day. He talks about your class every day, she wrote, especially Emma. It would mean the world to him to say a proper goodbye. Of course, I agreed immediately. I prepared the class for Lucas's visit, explaining that he had moved away but wanted to see everyone before summer vacation. Emma was especially excited, announcing to anyone who would listen that her kindergarten husband was coming back. When Lucas walked into our classroom on that last day of school, I barely recognized him. The timid, conflicted boy had been replaced by a child who carried himself with more confidence. He still had that same shy smile, but he looked directly at people now instead of at the floor. Emma rushed to hug him, and the other kids crowded around, sharing stories of what he'd missed. Mrs. Bennett stood by the door, watching with tears in her eyes. The bruises were gone, and though she still looked tired, there was a new steadiness to her presence. During the class party, she pulled me aside. I can never thank you enough, she said. The prosecutor said that your documentation was crucial. They're pressing charges this time. How is Lucas doing, really? I asked, watching him interact with his former classmates. He has good days and bad days, she admitted. He's in therapy now. The counselor says he's making progress with understanding that what his father did wasn't love. I watched Lucas carefully sharing his cupcake with Emma, making sure she got the piece with the most sprinkles. When another boy accidentally knocked over Emma's juice, Lucas simply helped clean it up instead of getting angry. Small moments, but telling ones. Mrs. Bennett followed my gaze. He talks about your lessons all the time, about how people who love each other don't hurt each other. He's teaching me too, in a way. As the school year ended and summer began, I found myself thinking about Lucas often. Unlike many students who faded from memory as new classes came and went, his story stayed with me. I wondered how he was doing, whether the hard-won peace in his life was lasting. In July, Mrs. Bennett sent a photo of Lucas at the community pool, beaming with his new swimming badge. In August, they invited me for ice cream to celebrate Lucas's 7th birthday. He proudly showed me his new shoes that lit up when he walked talked and told me about the karate class he was taking. My sensei says we only use karate to protect, never to hurt, he informed me solemnly, even if we're angry. When the new school year started, I had a fresh batch of kindergartners with their own quirks and challenges. Lucas was now in first grade in another school within our district. Mrs. Bennett had secured a restraining order against her ex-husband who was awaiting trial on multiple charges. She was working full-time at the hospital and taking online classes to advance her nursing career. I ran into them occasionally at the grocery store or community events. Lucas always had new accomplishments to share, and Mrs. Bennett slowly transformed from a frightened, withdrawn woman into someone who spoke with authority and purpose. She'd started volunteering with a domestic violence awareness group, helping other women recognize warning signs she had missed. In October, I received an unexpected call from the district superintendent's office. They were putting together a training program for teachers on recognizing signs of domestic violence in students' behavior and wanted me to participate based on my experience with the Bennett case. Ms. Rivera had recommended me. We need to do better as a district, the superintendent told me. Too many of these situations go unnoticed until it's too late. I agreed immediately. If sharing what I'd learned could help even one more child like Lucas, it would be worth it. The training was scheduled for our January professional development day, giving me plenty of time to prepare. In the meantime, Lucas continued to visit. One afternoon in November, he stopped by my classroom after school with a handmade card. Inside, in wobbly first grade handwriting, he'd written, "Thank you for teaching me about real love." Mrs. Bennett explained that his therapist had suggested writing thank you notes to people who had made a positive difference in his life as part of his healing process. "He was worried you might have forgotten him with your new students," she said with a smile. As if I could ever forget the boy who taught me more about resilience than I'd learned in 10 years of teaching. When January came, I found myself standing before a room of 50 educators, sharing Lucas's story, with names and identifying details changed, of course. I explained the warning signs I'd noticed, the resources that had helped, and the collaborative approach that had ultimately made a difference. The most important thing, I told them, is that we're sometimes the only safe adults in these children's lives. What seems like a behavior problem might actually be a cry for help. After the training, several teachers approached me with concerns about students in their own classes. The guidance department was flooded with requests for additional support. It felt like maybe, just maybe, we were making progress as a school community. Spring came again, bringing with it the 1-year anniversary of when Lucas had first hit Emma. I wondered if he remembered the date, or if it had faded in importance compared to the many changes since then. For me, it remained a pivotal moment. The day a simple classroom incident revealed a much deeper problem. Mrs. Bennett invited me to attend Lucas's karate belt ceremony in April. As I watched him demonstrate his moves with perfect focus and control, I couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. This was a child who now understood that strength wasn't about domination or fear, but about discipline and respect. After the ceremony, Lucas ran over with his new yellow belt proudly displayed. "Did you see me break the board, Ms. Johnson? I did it on the first try." "I saw. You were amazing," I told him. "I'm so proud of how hard you've worked." As we walked to the parking lot, Lucas spotted a familiar face. Emma and her mom were just arriving for the next ceremony. Emma's older brother was apparently in the intermediate class. The two children greeted each other with excited waves. "Emma's in my math group now," Lucas explained. "We go to the same school again." Mrs. Bennett smiled at Emma's mother. "They have a play date scheduled for this weekend. Some friendships just seem meant to be." I watched as Lucas carefully showed Emma his new belt, his face serious as he explained what each stripe meant. She listened with rapt attention, asking questions and congratulating him. There was something so pure about their interaction. Two children who had moved past a difficult moment to form a genuine friendship. That night, I sat on my porch reflecting on the past year. In my decade of teaching, I'd encountered many challenging situations, but Lucas's story had affected me more deeply than most. Perhaps because it showed both the darker side of what children absorb from home and the incredible capacity they have to change when given better models to follow. The district attorney had called last week to inform Mrs. Bennett that her ex-husband had accepted a plea deal. He would serve time and be required to complete extensive anger management and parenting classes before having any unsupervised contact with Lucas. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it offered some closure and protection. Mrs. Bennett had asked me if I would consider being a character witness for the upcoming custody hearing. Without hesitation, I agreed. I would tell the judge about the boy I'd watched transform from someone who thought love and hurt were intertwined to a child who understood what healthy relationships actually looked like. In teaching, we often talk about making a difference in children's lives, but Lucas had made just as much of a difference in mine. He'd reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. Not just to teach ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but to help shape kind, emotionally intelligent human beings. And sometimes, like Lucas had shown me, the lessons most worth learning weren't found in any curriculum. As the next school year progressed, things started falling into a rhythm. I checked in with Mrs. Bennett regularly, usually through quick text messages or the occasional coffee when our schedules lined up. The custody hearing stretched on longer than anyone expected. Mr. Bennett had hired some hotshot lawyer who kept finding ways to delay proceedings and poke holes in the case against him. "It's exhausting," Mrs. Bennett confided during one of our coffee meetups. "Every time I think we're making progress, they find another reason to postpone. Lucas keeps asking when it will be over." I've been working closely with Lucas's current teacher, Ms. Chen, to make sure he had consistent support at school. She was fantastic, one of those teachers who just instinctively gets kids and their needs. Lucas was thriving academically in her class, though he still had occasional emotional outbursts when stressed. Yesterday, he threw his math workbook across the room, Ms. Chen told me during our monthly check-in. But then he immediately apologized and asked if he could take a 5-minute break in the calm corner. That's huge progress from where he started. The calm corner was something we'd implemented in all the elementary classrooms after my presentation, a small space with sensory tools and emotional regulation charts. It gave kids somewhere to go when feelings got too big, without the shame of being sent to the principal's office. In February, I got a frantic call from Mrs. Bennett late one evening. My heart dropped when I saw her name on my caller ID. "He showed up at Lucas's basketball practice," she said, her voice shaking. "Robert just walked in like nothing was wrong. The coach didn't know about the restraining order." My grip tightened on the phone. "Is Lucas okay? Are you safe?" "We're at my sister's again," she replied. "Lucas is pretty shaken up." Robert tried to hug him, and Lucas just froze. He wouldn't talk the entire car ride here. I offered to come over, but Mrs. Bennett thought it might confuse Lucas more to see his teacher outside of school. Instead, I suggested some strategies she could try to help him process what happened. The next day, I touched base with his therapist, with Mrs. Bennett's permission, to make sure everyone was on the same page with supporting him. Lucas missed 3 days of school that week. When he returned, Ms. Chen said he was quieter than usual, but participated in activities. During lunch duty, I made a point to sit at his table, not making a big deal about it, but just being a familiar presence. He barely touched his sandwich, but did perk up when I asked about the book he was reading. "It's about a kid who becomes a ninja," he explained, showing me the cover. "He learns special moves to protect people." The custody hearing was finally scheduled for April. I took a personal day to testify, nervous but determined to advocate for Lucas. The courthouse was intimidating with its echoing hallways and formal atmosphere. Mrs. Bennett looked small sitting next to her attorney, but she gave me a brave smile when I caught her eye. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on what I'd observed in the classroom, both the concerning behaviors and the remarkable progress Lucas had made. The judge asked several follow-up questions about how children typically express trauma through behavior, and whether I thought Lucas's improvements were sustainable. sustainable. With continued support and a stable, safe home environment, yes, I answered confidently. He's shown exceptional resilience and a genuine desire to learn healthier ways of interacting. Mr. Bennett sat stone-faced through my testimony. He looked different than I'd imagined, more ordinary, less monster-like. It was unsettling to think that someone so normal-looking could cause so much fear and pain. During breaks, he huddled with his attorney, occasionally glancing my way with an expression I couldn't quite read. The hearing lasted 2 full days. In the end, the judge granted Mrs. Bennett full custody, with Mr. Bennett allowed only supervised visitation after completing court-mandated anger management and parenting classes. It wasn't the complete termination of rights that Mrs. Bennett had hoped for, but it was enough to ensure Lucas's safety in the immediate future. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett whispered, hugging me outside the courtroom. The lawyer said your testimony made a huge difference. Summer came, bringing the end of another school year. Lucas had officially finished first grade with solid grades and improved behavior reports. Mrs. Bennett sent me a photo of his report card with a message. He wanted you to see this right away. I'd almost forgotten about Emma in the midst of everything else, until I spotted the two of them at the community pool one Saturday in July. They were taking swimming lessons together, splashing and laughing like typical 7-year-olds. It warmed my heart to see their friendship had continued to flourish outside the classroom. Emma's mom waved me over to their table. Lucas is at our house nearly every weekend, she told me. Those two are inseparable. It's the sweetest thing. As we watched them practice floating on their backs, she lowered her voice. Emma told me about what happened in kindergarten. With Lucas hitting her, she says he's completely different now. Apparently he stands up for her when other boys tease her about her glasses. That fall, I got a new batch of kindergartners with their own unique challenges and personalities. But I kept tabs on Lucas through Ms. Rivera and occasional updates from Mrs. Bennett. He was now in 2nd grade and had joined the school chess club. His therapist had reduced their sessions to twice a month, citing exceptional progress. In November, Mrs. Bennett invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. It's just going to be us, my sister's family, and a couple of friends, she explained. Lucas specifically asked if you could come. He wants to show you his new room since we moved. I accepted immediately. Their new apartment was small but cozy, decorated with photos and Lucas's artwork. He had his own bedroom for the first time, painted blue with space-themed decals on the ceiling. He proudly showed me his collection of books and the desk where he did his homework. Mom says when I finish all my chores for a whole month, I can get a fish, he informed me, pointing to the empty tank already set up in the corner. During dinner, I noticed how much more relaxed Mrs. Bennett seemed in her own space, laughing and joining in conversations. She'd started taking classes to become a nurse practitioner and was dating a kind-eyed music teacher she'd met through a support group for single parents. Lucas sat between Emma, who had also been invited, and me at the table, chattering about his chess tournament and occasionally slipping vegetables he didn't want onto Emma's plate when he thought no one was looking. Emma rolled her eyes but ate them anyway, their silent communication speaking volumes about their friendship. After dinner, while the adults were cleaning up, I found Lucas and Emma building a fort in the living room with blankets and chair cushions. Ms. Johnson, you can be the castle guard, Lucas offered, handing me a paper towel roll wrapped in aluminum foil. Emma's the queen and I'm the knight who protects everyone. I accepted my role with appropriate seriousness, impressed by how naturally they included me in their game. As we played, I noticed Lucas's careful attention to Emma's ideas and how he checked in frequently with, "Is this okay?" or "Do you like this part?" Small but significant indicators of healthy relationship skills developing. Just before Christmas, tragedy struck. Mrs. Bennett called me in tears. Her sister had been in a serious car accident and wasn't expected to survive. She needed to travel immediately to the hospital in another state, but didn't want to pull Lucas out of school right before the holiday concert he'd been practicing for. Would it be completely inappropriate to ask if he could stay with you for 2 days? She asked hesitantly. He's been talking about his solo in the concert for weeks. My new boyfriend offered, but Lucas barely knows him, and you're one of the few adults he really trusts. I didn't even hesitate. Of course he can stay with me. I'd be happy to have him. Those 2 days with Lucas gave me an even deeper appreciation for his resilience. He was understandably worried about his aunt, but found comfort in sticking to routines. We baked cookies, walked my dog, and practiced his concert piece, a recorder solo of Jingle Bells that was simultaneously adorable and slightly painful to the ears. The concert went perfectly. Lucas remembered every note and beamed with pride when the audience applauded. I recorded it to show Mrs. Bennett when she returned. That night, as I tucked him into my spare bed, he asked a question that caught me off guard. "Ms. Johnson, do you think my dad will ever get better? Like how I got better at not hitting when I'm mad?" I sat on the edge of the bed, choosing my words carefully. "I think people can change if they really want to and work hard at it, just like you did. But it takes time and a lot of practice." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm still practicing. Sometimes I still want to hit things when I'm really, really mad, but I use my words instead. That's what makes me so proud of you," I told him honestly. "Not that you never feel angry, but that you're learning better ways to handle it." Mrs. Bennett returned the next day, exhausted but relieved. Her sister had stabilized and was expected to recover. Lucas ran into her arms the moment she arrived at my door, and the look of pure love between them was something I'll never forget. As winter turned to spring, Lucas continued to thrive. Mr. Bennett had completed his court-ordered programs and was now having supervised visits twice a month. According to Mrs. Bennett, these were going as well as could be expected. Awkward, but without incident. Lucas is always quiet afterward, she shared during one of our check-ins. His therapist says that's normal and we should just follow his lead on how much he wants to talk about it. In April, my phone rang late one evening. It was Mrs. Bennett, but unlike previous late calls, she sounded excited rather than distressed. "I got the job," she exclaimed. "The one at Children's Hospital with regular hours and much better pay. We're going to be able to move into a small house with a yard." I congratulated her enthusiastically, knowing how hard she'd worked for this opportunity and what it meant for their financial stability. "There's something else," she continued, her voice softening. "Lucas and I have been talking. He wants to know if you'd consider being his godmother. I know it's not traditional since he's already 7, but you've been such an important part of our journey." I felt tears spring to my eyes, completely taken by surprise. "I'd be honored," I managed to say. The official ceremony was small, just us, Emma's family, Mrs. Bennett's sister, and a few close friends gathered in a community center garden. Lucas wore a button-up shirt and kept tugging at the collar, but his smile was genuine when he handed me the handmade card he'd created for the occasion. Inside, he'd drawn a picture of the 3 of us, him, his mom, and me, standing in front of what I assumed was their new house. Underneath, in his now improved handwriting, he'd written, "Thank you for helping me and Mom. Love, Lucas." As we shared cake afterward, I watched Lucas and Emma chasing each other around the garden, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Mrs. Bennett stood beside me, looking more content than I'd ever seen her. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't noticed that day in kindergarten," she mused. "If you just thought it was normal kid stuff and moved on." I thought about the mandatory reporting training I'd recently helped update for our district, now being implemented in schools across the county, about the calm corners in classrooms and the increased coordination between teachers and counselors. About all the other Lucases out there, some noticed, some still waiting for someone to see past behavior to its causes. "I'm just glad I was paying attention," I replied simply. 2 years after that pivotal day in my classroom, Lucas was a different child, still working through his experiences but armed with tools and surrounded by support. Mrs. Bennett was building a career and a safe home, and I had become not just a teacher who'd helped a student through a crisis, but a permanent part of their family's story. As the garden party wound down, Lucas ran up with Emma trailing behind him. "Can we have a sleepover next weekend?" he asked his mom. "Emma's never seen our new house." Mrs. Bennett smiled at Emma's mother, who nodded approval. "Sure, buddy, we'll get get the guest room ready. I don't need the guest room, Emma declared. I'm bringing my sleeping bag for the living room. Lucas says we can build a blanket fort like last time. I couldn't help but smile. From broken Barbie dolls to blanket forts, these two had come full circle, as had we all.